Dragon Ball FighterZ, a game with some incredible moments, compelling storylines, and one that's been in the public eye ever since before its release. And delay-based netcode. Hopefully not for too much longer, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. At the heart of any esport should be a circuit, or in this case, a world tour. Now, world tours are important for a lot of reasons. They give structure for those who are competing to become the best. They often set the stage for a game's most intense rivalries. They help developers reach wider competitive audiences by offering prize pools, pot bonuses, and whatnot. And last but not least, they inform the viewers and spectators on what events are most important by creating more stakes. Unfortunately, Dragon Ball FighterZ has had a less than desirable history when it comes to world tours, and in this video I'm going to explain to you why. You may be asking, why is this guy bringing all this up? Well, as the person who's run EVO, CEO, Combo Breaker, and a ton of other majors for DBFZ, I really think Bandai dropped the ball in a big way when it comes to this game's world tours. And my audience wanted it as a sub-goal. This is the rise and fall of the DBFZ World Tour. Be sure to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment with what you think. Let's get into it. As with any story, we have to start at the beginning. It's 2018, people are playing the game like crazy, some love the game, some hate the game, but they all share one thing in common. They all have their eyes on the game and everyone is watching. In June, they drop a bombshell on the community. Not only did they announce a world tour for the game, but it started soon. A week after the trailer dropped, it started at CEO 2018. Now, the 2018 World Tour is what I would call experimental. They used a format where there were 7 saga events that took place in different parts of the world. The winner of each of these events would win an actual Dragon Ball, which qualified them for the World Finals. They even had a special clause where if someone somehow won all 7 events, they would be floated to Grand Finals of the World Tour's championship event. They also stressed that this tour included offline and online events via what they called Dragon Radar events. There were 19 of these Dragon Radar events in which the winner would win an expenses-paid trip to one of the 7 saga events. An important thing to notice is that while online events were involved, the focus was 100% on offline saga events. These were kind of the cornerstones of the tour. This is going to be important for later, so just keep this in mind. I think they wanted to make a flavorful and fun approach to the game's first world tour, and honestly, it makes sense from a marketing perspective. With an IP as strong as Dragon Ball that has such wide casual appeal as well as competitive appeal, you'd want them to feel like the tour is very connected to the series. That being said, from a competitive perspective, there were some really big flaws. Firstly, there are only 8 slots in the World Finals, 7 from the winners of each saga event, and then 1 last chance qualifier or LCQ. For those of you who don't know, LCQs are often open entry tournaments with the winner receiving a slot in the World Tour Finals. This really isn't a ton of slots considering just how large the game's competitive scene was. I mean, the first EVO for this game got well over 2,000 entrants. Having to actually win an event to qualify proved extremely difficult, even for players that were regarded as extremely strong at the game. This issue was amplified even more by one factor that they certainly didn't plan around: Kazunoko. Kazunoko kicked off the 2018 World Tour by winning CEO 2018, despite other players like Goichi and Sonic Fox being, kind of more in the public eye due to their rivalry, and Hook Gang God coming off a big win at Summit of Power right before. Kazunoko, after winning CEO and only placing 5th at EVO, I know, right? Only 5th, wow. EVO was not a tour event at this time, by the way. It was not on the World Tour at all. He would go on to prove that he was easily the best player on the planet by winning every single other Dragon Ball FighterZ major he entered, except for Canada Cup 2018, where he would get 2nd to Sonic Fox. And at the end of it all, it left him with 4 Dragon Balls. And honestly, this is where things get real messy. Part of me believes that even though they had that clause for someone winning all of the 7 Dragon Balls, they didn't actually think anyone would win multiple. And this really showed at the finals for the 2018 World Tour, which, by the way, were held in Los Angeles and had a $25,000 pot bonus. Since Kazunoko won 4 of the 7 Dragon Balls, they added 3 extra last chance qualifiers so they wouldn't have only 5 people on World Finals instead of 8. This isn't inherently bad, but the way they handled it might be in contention for the worst way to handle it possible. Each last chance qualifier was a single elimination tournament, meaning that you lost one set and it was over for you. Why is this weird? Most fighting game tournaments are double elimination, where even if you lose in the winner's bracket, you get another chance in the loser's bracket. And we see some amazing losers runs throughout history in fighting games because of this. This was not possible here because you lose one set, you're out of the tournament. Also, due to the nature of the organizers not having a ton of time and abundance, and having to adhere to a schedule, the LCQs were all done one after the other. And so if you were a player and you were competing in multiple last chance qualifiers and you made a run that was really, really deep into one but didn't win, you'd have to immediately turn around and play again in tournament, and you have to reset your mental. You're really tired from playing these really high level sets. It was just really, really tough, I think, for a lot of people to get back in gear after losing, in some cases in the finals of an LCQ, and then having to turn around and play a whole tournament all over again. The icing on the cake is that the seeding for these LCQs, which for those of you who don't know, seeding is a process that determines the starting positions of players in a bracket. The seeding didn't change from LCQ to LCQ, at least it didn't change meaningfully. And so this led to some players getting gatekept because they would actually run into the same player 4 times in a row if they entered all 4 last chance qualifiers. This actually happened with Aqua and Apology Man, and it was like memed on quite a lot at the time. But it's something that players shouldn't really have to go through when we're talking about, last chance qualifier for the World Tour finals of an event. But despite the format being complete nonsense, I think everyone had fun watching the finals. There were some incredible matches. It all ended with Kazunoko standing at the top, as at this point everyone knew that Kaz was the best in the world easily, and so it was not surprising to anyone that he would be the winner of the first World Tour. And after everything was said and finished, Bandai would reveal a Season 2 DLC package for the game, including new characters, balance changes. But then we have to fast forward a few months to June of 2019, where once again, they would release a trailer announcing the second year of the Dragon Ball FighterZ World Tour. The second installment of the World Tour would come with some changes that were very welcome in comparison to the first. They abandoned the Dragon Ball system in favor of a point system, which was more in line with other World Tours like Tekken. Which makes a lot of sense considering that, Bandai runs both World Tours for Tekken and Dragon Ball FighterZ. This time around, there were only 3 Saga events: EVO, Red Bull Japan, and Red Bull Spain. These 3 events were auto qualifiers for the finals, but also had point values up to 550 that you could win depending on your placing. It's worth noting that even though those events auto-qualified for the finals, this was the peak of competition for Dragon Ball fighters. So Goichi, Sonic Fox, and Wawa, who auto-qualified, still were seen competing at most majors that year. They got rid of the Dragon Radar events and replaced them with Tenkaichi events. These were 10 smaller but still major events that you could win up to 200 points at. There was no cap on how many of the events you could enter, and no region locking, so it really incentivized strong players to travel the world and rack up points at offline events to qualify for the finals. 15 players would qualify for the World Finals, 3 from the auto-qualifying Saga events that we talked about before, and then 12 players excluding them via points. There was also 1 slot set aside for an LCQ, once again for a total of 16 players in the World Finals. This World Tour was absolutely incredible. It had great storylines, even though Goichi was very dominant in winning every event he entered except Red Bull Spain Saga. You could tell that everyone was grinding and improving a ton from event to event. It turned out that when the tour ended, Tachikawa, one of the best players in Japan, and Seo, the best player in Singapore, tied for 15th in point values. Since this was the cutoff point, only one of them could qualify directly for the World Finals. And this slot went to Seo because he ended up placing 1 match better at Spain Saga, getting 13th, while Tachikawa got 17th at Spain Saga, losing to his mentor, Kazunoko. What this meant is that Tachikawa would have to battle through the last chance qualifier for this year. You want to talk about difficult tournaments? This last chance qualifier was one of the greatest tournaments ever held for this game. 235 entrants, and the level of play was extremely high. Keep in mind, you had to win this event to qualify. It wasn't enough to place top 8 or even make it to grand finals. You had to win in order for your hard work to pay off. After being heartbroken by not qualifying directly, Tachikawa battled his way through the LCQ, taking down Vesprim, Mintyu, Kaiden, Aliun, and then Kane twice to qualify after being bracket reset. If you did not watch this last chance qualifier, please take the time to go watch it. One of the best tournaments ever held for this game, easily. Unfortunately for Tachikawa, his work was not done. The next day was the World Finals. The 16 players that qualified were split into 4-person groups and played in round-robin format, with the top 2 from each making it to the final bracket. There were a ton of unexpected twists during groups, like Sonic Fox not qualifying for top 8 at all, actually not even winning a single set. Bombabon taking a set on Goichi, who was pretty much deemed as unbeatable at the time, only to not qualify for top 8 himself. And Super Noon taking down last year's champion Kazunoko, denying him the chance to get the repeat win and punching his own ticket to top 8. Overall, this second World Tour was leaps and bounds better than the tour before it, and it was reflected in players' motivation and all-around excitement from players and spectators alike. Goichi would go on to win and solidify himself as the clear best player in the world at the time. Once again, after the finals, Bandai would show a trailer for a new season of DLC, this time being Season 3, and man, people were very, very amped about it. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we wouldn't get news about another World Tour for quite a while. Keep in mind, Season 2 World Finals were in February of 2020. We wouldn't get an announcement of a new World Tour, now called the World Championship, until August of 2021, along with the patch that people call Season 3.5. This is where things start taking a big turn for the worse in my eyes. Adapting the tour to an online-only format sucked, but it was reasonable given the health concern. However, the execution seemed really haphazard and just kind of thrown together. Bandai designated 11 regions that were eligible to compete in the World Championship. I'll put the breakdown on the screen right now. Something should look wrong with all of this. It turns out that not all regions were able to participate, so it's not really a world tour. In fact, there were quite a few left out. Even Canada, who has players that often participate in online events held in the US, were not eligible because the regions were USA East and West instead of North America East and West. The format saw some pretty drastic changes as well. This is the first time Bandai would try to implement community opt-in style events. This meant that anyone could host an online tournament and have it count for points in the championship as long as it was big enough and it was in an eligible region. These were now the Tenkaichi events worth up to 100 points max. The 7 larger regions, including Japan, the 4 split-up regions in Europe, and the 2 regions of the US, also had one Bandai-run Master Challenge event, each worth a max of 200 points. Players' total scores would consist of their 4 highest point values from Tenkaichi events and their 1 Master Challenge point value. Events were also region-locked, meaning you could only participate in the events created and designated for your region. The combination of events being online with that fantastic delay-based netcode, and also there being a point cap, meant that players would have much less of a desire to grind and improve under these conditions. Many forced themselves to play because it was the only way to qualify for the regional finals, where you got to play real Dragon Ball fighters. Or was it? It turned out that the regional finals would actually consist of 8 invited players and 4 qualified players from each major region. This contributed to players being even less motivated to participate, as many were directly invited and didn't need to slog through the online circuit in the first place. Also, due to lack of communication, there were many players who could not get passports or travel arrangements figured out in time, so they spent a ton of time grinding these online tournaments on this delay-based netcode for no payoff at all. The top placer from the 4 smaller regions, Mexico, Australia, Middle East, and Brazil, qualified directly to World Finals, skipping a regional finals, which was necessary, so I will give them credit for at least not overlooking that. At regional finals, the 12 players were split into 2 groups and played in a round-robin format. This time, top 2 qualified for the final bracket and winners, 3rd and 4th qualified for the final bracket and losers, and bottom 2 from each group was eliminated. From there, the top 4 players from the top 8 bracket qualified for World Finals. And that is our next and final stop for this year, the World Championship Finals. However, it seemed like there'd be another roadblock in the way. Bandai would make the conscious decision to indefinitely postpone the World Championship Finals as the dangers of sickness were far too prominent. We would be in the dark about the finals until early July 2021, where they would announce that the World Championship Finals would take place 2 weeks from then. Unfortunately, player replacements had to be made from Metplex from the Middle East due to lack of adequate preparation from Bandai's end, and Sonic Fox, who was displeased with the releasing of a new patch so close to World Finals. Both of these instances left a bad taste in the mouths of many, and it really felt like they were just rushing through everything without giving enough consideration for the community that this was supposed to be a celebration of. July rolls around, and we're finally at the World Championship Finals. They took the format from Season 2 World Finals and copy-pasted it here, which is a good thing, by the way. 4 groups, round robin, top 2 make it to final bracket with first place and winners and second place and losers. Long story short, Wawa destroyed everyone. He would drop a set to Cohen in groups, but still finished in first place in his group to start in the winners bracket. From there, he wouldn't drop a single game as he was crowned the world champion. Many waited with bated breath awaiting a possible Season 4 DLC pack announcement. I mean, I thought it was pure copium the entire time, but with how things were going, I don't blame people for needing something to believe it. There wasn't any DLC announced, but they had announced another year of the World Tour at the DBFZ show, where the rescheduled World Championship Finals was also announced. It would start with EVO 2022 just a few weeks later, which I ran, by the way. Just putting that out there. And so we arrive at the 4th iteration of the DBFZ World Tour. You'll notice that a lot of things are copy-pasted from the previous World Championship, which creates some issues that we'll get into in just a bit. The format you will see will look very familiar. Events are split into power events and Tenkaichi events. Power events are essentially the Saga events of old. There's 12 of them, all offline. EVO is actually named a Power Plus event, meaning it's worth even more than a normal power event. It's worth 550 as a max as opposed to the normal 300 of a power event. And it's the only one of its kind. Bandai also actually adds in pot bonuses to these events. For example, they added a $5,000 pot bonus to EVO 2022, and I believe they add $1,000 to each of the power event prize pools as well. The opt-in style Tenkaichi events return, but this time they added a higher tier for events that exceed 128 entrants. This would mean online events can be worth up to 220 points max for those who place first. Player totals are made up of their 2 highest values from power events and their 4 highest values from Tenkaichi events. They once again go with 11 regions, but this time they make some changes. United States East and West now changed to NA East and West, which means they now include Canada. Mexico and Australia are unchanged. Europe maintains being split into 4 sections, but this time Europe 1, which contains France, is given 2 slots to match NA East and West, as well as Japan. Brazil and Middle East are completely axed and replaced with Southeast Asia and East Asia. And this is where things start to go horribly wrong. The backlash from the regions I mentioned being replaced was understandably severe. Many community members, including myself, stated their displeasure with regions like Brazil and Middle East being left out, despite their support in the previous World Tour. However, I will give Bandai credit, as this is one of the instances where they listened to what the people were saying, as they announced that they were adding 2 more regions, being Brazil and Middle East, back into the World Tour. They didn't stop there either. They announced an extended division would be included, which essentially is a catch-all region for anyone that was not included in the original 13 official regions. The player with the most points, not from any of the 13 regions, would go on to World Finals, but it has to be from offline power events only. So now, 19 players from various regions will qualify for the World Finals, and slot amounts vary from region to region. Now that I give you the format rundown, I'm going to tell you a few reasons why I think the current World Tour is very flawed. So, to me, it's very clear that many of this World Tour's format choices were taken from the World Championships from 2021 to 2022. This has caused some problems in translating from a fully online tour to one that is supposed to be primarily offline. So the flow of the World Championships went qualifying events that will qualify you for regional finals, that will qualify you for world finals. It's worth noting that the regional finals each had 8 direct invites for each region, with 4 more qualifying on top via points. This meant there was much more room to qualify in a reasonable way because those 8 players were directly invited and were not going to be in the point race. The current World Tour has no regional finals and no direct invites. This, coupled with a very limited amount of slots per region, means that not only does it feel like it's extremely difficult to qualify, it's also a chore because of how relevant online events are. What exactly do I mean by this? Well, let's do some simple math. The current World Tour takes your top 2 power event values and your top 4 Tenkaichi event values. Let's say you're an amazing player and you manage to win EVO, which is worth 550 points, and then you manage to win another power event, which is worth 300 points, for a total of 850 points for your offline events. It turns out that this would mean less than winning 4 of the highest tier of online Tenkaichi events. Since they can be worth 220 points for first place, winning 4 means you get a total of 880 points, which is actually 30 more than you earned for winning EVO and another offline power event. I cannot understate how big of an issue this is. The reason that they went back to naming it the World Tour is because they're trying to highlight that this is the return to offline events. I mean, the trailer for this World Tour included only clips from the first and second World Tours, which were exclusively offline. And of course, the naming difference of being a World Tour and the mainly online circuit being the World Championship. However, their format means that online events actually mean more, which is especially bad considering they announced rollback netcode at EVO, but we've heard nothing else since then, meaning an overwhelming majority of this tour will still be played on delay-based netcode. Not only that, but since the amount of events that can count to your score is capped, it once again disincentivizes players to travel and compete once they've gotten the values they feel they need. It actually doesn't just hurt players, it hurts TOs as well. The opt-in system is supposed to make TOs feel like their events are contributing to the tour. However, since the values that make up players' score are only counted from their 4 highest Tenkaichi values, that means that only the biggest TOs really matter. This in turn means that players will only want to enter the biggest events because they are the ones that are worth entering, meaning any other TO is kind of left behind. This is not a theory craft, by the way, this has already happened with North America East. These are the biggest issues with the tour in current day, but I'm not just going to criticize without offering some suggestions. First, Bandai needs to realize that offline events are the cornerstone of fighting games, and what sets them apart from so many other communities. This should be reflected in the World Tour. Adjust the format so that offlines mean the most by far. I think perhaps they should uncap the amount of points you can gain from offlines and also reduce the earning potential from online events. What this will do is make online events a supplement and not a primary means of qualifying. If you significantly reduce the amount of points that onlines are worth, you could uncap the amount earned from an online's or Tenkaichi events, meaning everyone's events would matter so long as they meet the entrant minimum of 16. Another suggestion I would have is to remove the region locking aspect from the point leaderboard. This is a tough one to get correct because giving smaller regions a chance to show themselves off, I think is very important and valuable. But I also think that in a world tour, those that are traveling, grinding, and competing the most should be rewarded regardless of what region they are from. And so, if there are 8 people that are performing very, very well from any region, no matter how big or small it is, they should be rewarded for that aspect. I also believe that Bandai should bring back the last chance qualifier. It's baffling to me that there aren't any plans for one at the moment because adding the extra regions led to them having 19 slots at the World Finals. I would love for them to run a last chance qualifier or even 2 of them. They could do it in a way where multiple people from an LCQ actually make it to World Finals. Ideally, from a TOing perspective, I think 5 qualifying would make sense for a total of 24 players, which would be a very nice even bracket number in terms of seeding and buys. Another thing that I forgot to mention that is pretty unfortunate about this World Tour is the scheduling. They announced in July that the tour would be starting at EVO just a month later. That means that the tour starts with the biggest and most important event. So, once EVO ends, there isn't anything nearly as big or important to look forward to in terms of the tour. It's not like the World Tour in Season 2, which had 3 big important sagas that were more spread out. That's not to say that there aren't any other great events out there, because there are, just that there's a lack of build-up with the tour that was existent in previous ones. Overall, I think this current World Tour is very dull, and the sentiment has been echoed by many players I know who are participating. The emphasis has to be placed back on offline events, even more than what they've done if the tour is to truly be great again. How do you feel about the World Tours? Let me know with a comment below. Be sure to like this video and subscribe if you want more content like this. This is my first time doing a video format like this, so let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.